My daughter said she needed money for rent, then posted poolside pics from Cancun. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could ever reach a mother's heart. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. If you also believe that we still have value, even after 60, type 1 in the comments. And please, leave a like and subscribe. Let's show that we're strong together. My name is Susan Patricia Williams. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago, where the winter wind rattles my windows and the walls are so thin I can hear every word of my neighbor's television shows. The radiator clanks all night, and there's a persistent water stain on the ceiling that I've learned to ignore, along with so many other things that would cost money I don't have to fix. My apartment smells faintly of lavender air freshener, the cheap kind from the dollar store that I spray religiously every morning, trying to mask the mustiness that seems to seep from everything when you're living paycheck to paycheck. My hands shake slightly when I reach for things now, arthritis creeping in after decades of physical labor, and my gray hair hangs limp around my face because I cut it myself in the bathroom mirror to save the $30 a salon would charge. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., I sit at my tiny kitchen table with its chipped formica surface and peeling edges, drinking instant coffee from a mug that reads, "World's Best Mom," a Mother's Day gift Emily gave me when she was 12. The mug has a crack running down one side, held together with super glue that's yellowed with age, but I can't bring myself to throw it away. It's one of the few reminders I have left of when she still thought I was someone worth celebrating. My kitchen window looks out onto the parking lot of a convenience store where teenagers gather after school, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls as they share secrets and dreams the way Emily and I used to do. I watch them sometimes, remembering when my daughter would burst through that door after school, her backpack heavy with books and her heart light with stories about her day, when she still saw me as the most important person in her world. The apartment is furnished with pieces I've collected over the years from thrift stores and yard sales, a couch with cushions that sag in the middle, a coffee table with rings from countless mugs, a television so old it has knobs instead of a remote. Everything is clean but worn, functional but tired, like me. The walls are bare except for a few photographs of Emily at various ages, her smile bright and innocent, before she learned to see me as something to be used rather than someone to be loved. That Tuesday morning in February started like every other. The radiator was performing its usual percussion concert. The coffee was bitter and weak. I use half the recommended amount to make it last longer. And I was sorting through bills with the meticulous attention of someone who's learned that every dollar has to be stretched until it screams. My Social Security check covers rent and utilities, but there's never enough left over for anything that might make life feel like living instead of just surviving. I was calculating whether I could afford the generic version of my blood pressure medication when my phone rang at 9:43 a.m. The sound made me jump. Phone calls in the morning usually meant bad news, and at my age, bad news could be anything from a medical emergency to a bill collector. But when I saw Emily on the caller ID, my heart did that familiar flutter it always does when my daughter calls, even though she rarely calls anymore unless she needs something. "Mom?" Her voice was shaky, strained, with that particular tremor that meant she was either crying or about to cry. In the background, I could hear the familiar sounds of Chicago traffic and what sounded like construction equipment. "Mom, I need to talk to you." I set down my coffee mug so quickly that some of the weak brew sloshed onto my stack of unpaid bills, creating brown stains on the electric company's final notice. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Are you hurt?" The panic in my voice was immediate and instinctive. Even at 34 years old, Emily is still my baby, still the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, trembling until I wrapped my arms around her and promised everything would be okay. "I'm in trouble, Mom. Bad trouble." The words tumbled out in a rush, punctuated by what sounded like genuine distress. "I'm 3 months behind on rent. 3 months. My landlord says if I don't pay by Friday, he's going to evict me. I don't know what else to do. Everyone I know is going through their own financial problems, and I can't ask my friends to lend me this kind of money." My chest tightened with the familiar ache of knowing my daughter was in pain and feeling helpless to fix it. This wasn't the first time Emily had called with a financial emergency. It was the 5th time in 8 months, each crisis more urgent than the last. Each time, she'd promised it would be different, that she was getting her life together, that this was just a temporary setback. "How much do you need, honey?" I asked, already mentally calculating which bills I could delay, which medications I could skip, which meals I could replace with peanut butter crackers and whatever else I could find in my nearly empty pantry. $4,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $4,000 was more than I received in 2 months of Social Security payments. It was more money than I'd ever had in my savings account at one time, more than I'd spent on myself in the past 2 years combined. But this was Emily. My Emily, who I'd raised alone after her father walked out when she was 18 months old, leaving nothing but a note saying he wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility. Emily, who I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, cleaning offices at night until my back screamed in protest, babysitting neighbors' children on weekends when I should have been resting, working retail during the day until my feet bled in my cheap shoes. "Mom, are you there?" Her voice was smaller now, vulnerable in a way that transported me back to when she was 7 and had fallen off her bike, scraping her knee so badly that we'd had to go to the emergency room where I'd held her hand, while the doctor cleaned the wound and she'd whispered, "Make it stop hurting, Mama." "I'm here, baby. I'm thinking." I was thinking about my grandmother's silver bracelet, the one my mother had given me on my wedding day with tears in her eyes, and stories about the women in our family who had worn it before me. It was the only piece of jewelry I owned that had any real value, appraised years ago at just over $2,000. Combined with what little I had in savings and maybe a small loan against my Social Security check. "I can get you the money," I said finally, the words feeling like I was signing away a piece of my soul. "But Emily, sweetheart, this has to be the last time. I'm living on a fixed income, and I can't keep—" "Oh my God, Mom, thank you so much." Her relief was immediate and overwhelming, and for a moment, it felt like the old days when making Emily happy was the most important thing in my world. "I promise. I swear on everything I hold dear. This is absolutely the last time. I've got some job interviews lined up, and there's this new opportunity that could change everything for me. I just need to get through this rough patch." A new opportunity. She'd mentioned opportunities before, promises of better jobs, higher salaries, chances to finally get ahead. But the crises kept coming, each one more urgent than the last, each one requiring more money than the previous emergency. "Just promise me you'll be more careful with money from now on," I said, hating how I sounded like I was lecturing her but unable to stop myself. "Maybe we could sit down together and go over your budget? I could help you figure out—" "Mom, I really have to go. I'm supposed to meet with my landlord in an hour, and I need to call him to tell him the money is coming. Can you wire it today? I'll text you all the information you need." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll go to the bank this afternoon." You're the best, Mom. I love you so much. I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words warmed me in a way that made the financial sacrifice feel worthwhile. When was the last time Emily had told me she loved me? When was the last time she'd called me for any reason other than needing help? After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the cracked mug and the pile of bills that would have to wait even longer to be paid. Outside, the February wind was rattling my windows with a sound like bones shaking, and I could hear Mrs. Peterson's television through the thin walls. She always had it too loud because her hearing was going, just like mine was starting to go, just like everything was starting to go when you reached my age. I spent the rest of that day liquidating the remnants of my life to save my daughter's apartment. The silver bracelet went to a pawn shop on Western Avenue, where a teenager with multiple piercings and an attitude of profound boredom offered me $1,800 for something that had been in my family for 3 generations. The shop smelled like cigarettes and desperation, and I felt like I was betraying every woman who had worn that bracelet before me. I withdrew my entire savings account, $847. 32, accumulated over years of skipping meals and walking instead of taking the bus, quarters and dollar bills saved from grocery money and holiday gifts. The bank teller looked at me with something that might have been pity when I asked to close the account entirely. Then I took out a small loan against next month's Social Security check. sitting in a dingy office that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams, while a man in a cheap suit explained the terms in a voice that suggested he'd given this speech countless times to desperate people who had run out of options. By 4 p.m., I was standing in line at a wire transfer service, holding an envelope with Emily's landlord's information and $4,000 in cash. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the magnitude of what I was doing. This money represented months of careful budgeting, years of small sacrifices, a lifetime of trying to build some kind of financial security in a world that seemed designed to strip it away from people like me. But it was for Emily. It was so my daughter wouldn't lose her home. I sent the money and went home to a dinner of canned soup and stale crackers, telling myself that Emily's gratitude, her relief, her promise that this was the last time, made it all worthwhile. I went to bed early that night, exhausted by the emotional toll of the day, and dreamed of the little girl who used to think I could fix anything. 3 days later, I was sitting in my living room with my laptop, an ancient machine Emily had convinced me to buy years ago, so we can stay in touch easier, though she'd rarely used it for that purpose. Scrolling through Facebook because it was one of my few remaining connections to the outside world. That's when I saw them. The photos were impossible to miss. Emily, radiant in a bright red bikini, cocktail in hand, laughing beside a crystal-clear swimming pool with palm trees swaying in the background. The location tag read, Moon Palace Resort, Cancun, Mexico. The caption, written in the carefree tone of someone without a worry in the world, said, Living my best life. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. Blessed vacation. Paradise. Living my best life. The laptop slipped from my hands and crashed to the floor. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Emily on the beach, Emily at a poolside bar, Emily in what looked like an expensive restaurant with a man I'd never seen before. Handsome, well-dressed, clearly not someone who was struggling financially. Every photo was a testament to luxury I'd never experienced, funded by money I'd scraped together from the last remnants of my financial security. The timestamps showed the photos were taken yesterday. Less than 72 hours after I'd wired her $4,000 for rent money, she'd claimed she desperately needed to avoid eviction. Something inside me didn't just break. It shattered completely, like a mirror dropped from a great height, leaving sharp fragments that cut deeper the more I tried to put them back together. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated cruelty. Systematic exploitation of a mother's love by someone who had turned that love into a weapon against me. I scrolled through more photos, my hands trembling as each image drove the knife of betrayal deeper. Emily raising a toast with expensive champagne, Emily getting a massage on the beach, Emily shopping in what looked like high-end boutiques. The man appeared in several photos, his arm around her waist, his smile proprietary and satisfied. I called her number, my fingers shaking so badly I had to try 3 times to dial correctly. It went straight to voicemail, that cheerful, carefree voice saying she was probably off having an adventure and would call back when she could. I hung up and called again. Voicemail again. I sent a text. Emily, I saw your photos from Mexico. We need to talk. No response. I tried calling once more, and this time the call went straight to voicemail without even ringing. She had blocked me. My own daughter, the person I had sacrificed everything for, had taken my money, lied to me about needing it for rent, spent it on a luxury vacation, and then blocked my number when I tried to ask her about it. I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by the cheap furniture and faded photographs that represented the life I'd built around loving someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat. The silence felt different now. Not peaceful, but hollow. Like the echo you hear in an empty house after the last piece of furniture has been moved out. For the first time in my adult life, I understood what it meant to be truly alone. Not just physically alone, but emotionally abandoned by the one person I'd believed would always be there, would always love me, would always see me as more than just a resource to be exploited. The betrayal was complete. The woman who had given birth to Emily, raised her, sacrificed everything for her, had been discarded like a used tissue, forgotten the moment she was no longer needed. And the worst part? I had done it to myself, convinced that martyrdom was the same thing as love. Sitting in my empty kitchen, staring at those vacation photos, the memories came flooding back like a dam bursting. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dream I'd abandoned for Emily's sake, they all felt like cruel jokes now. I remembered the night shifts at the hospital laundry when Emily was 5. I'd work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., sorting dirty linens and operating industrial washing machines that filled the basement with steam so thick you could barely see. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watched Emily for $20 a night. Money I couldn't afford but had to pay because childcare was impossible to find for those hours. I'd come home at 7:30 a.m., exhausted and smelling like industrial bleach, to find Emily already awake, sitting at our tiny kitchen table in her Care Bears pajamas, eating cereal and watching cartoons. She'd run to me with such joy, throwing her little arms around my waist, and I'd hold her tight, breathing in the sweet scent of her Johnson's baby shampoo. "Mama, you smell funny," she'd say, wrinkling her nose but not pulling away. "It's just work smell, baby. Let Mama take a quick shower and then we'll have breakfast together before I take you to school." I'd shower in 3 minutes. We only had a small water heater. Then make her scrambled eggs and toast cut into fun shapes. We'd talk about her dreams, her friends, what she wanted to be when she grew up. She changed her mind constantly. Astronaut, teacher, princess, veterinarian. I'd nod seriously at each new aspiration, telling her she could be anything she wanted. "You're going to college, Emily," I'd tell her, brushing her long brown hair into pigtails. "You're going to have choices I never had." After dropping her at school, I'd sleep for 4 hours if I was lucky, then wake up to clean houses for wealthy families in Lincoln Park. I'd scrub their toilets, mop their floors, organize their closets full of clothes that cost more than I made in a month. The women who hired me were usually kind but distant, treating me with the polite indifference reserved for service workers. I'd pick Emily up from school, help her with homework, make dinner from whatever was on sale at the grocery store, and try to stay awake long enough to read her a bedtime story. Then I'd collapse into bed for a few hours before starting the cycle again. This was my life for 8 years. When Emily turned 13, I took a job at a department store during the day and kept one cleaning job on weekends. It meant less money but more stability, and I wanted to be home in the evenings to help her navigate adolescence. That's when the real expenses started. Designer jeans because everyone at school has them, Mom. School trips that cost hundreds of dollars. A laptop for her homework that stretched my budget to breaking point. Dance classes, piano lessons, summer camps. Anything to give her the opportunities I'd never had. I wore the same 3 outfits to work, rotating them so carefully that my coworkers probably thought I owned more clothes than I did. My shoes had holes that I covered with duct tape on the inside. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so Emily could have real meals. "Mom, why don't you ever buy yourself anything nice?" she asked once when she was 15, looking at me in my faded work uniform. "Because you're my investment, sweetheart," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "Your future is worth more than any dress I could buy." She rolled her eyes. Teenagers do that. But I thought I saw something like gratitude flash across her face. College was the hardest 4 years of my life. Emily got into Northwestern, a prestigious school with tuition that made my head spin. Financial aid covered some of it, but I still needed to come up with $18,000 a year. I took out loans against my future Social Security, worked overtime until my manager worried I'd collapse, and sold everything of value I owned except my grandmother's bracelet. I moved to an even smaller apartment to save money. My back started giving out from all the physical labor, but I couldn't afford to see a doctor. I developed a persistent cough that lasted months, but I told myself it was just stress. Emily thrived at Northwestern. She joined a sorority, made friends from wealthy families, traveled to Europe one summer with classmates whose parents paid for everything. I was so proud of her, so happy that she was experiencing the world I'd only dreamed about. "My daughter's at Northwestern," I'd tell anyone who would listen. The grocery store cashier, my co-workers, my neighbors. It was my greatest achievement, proof that all the sacrifice had been worthwhile. She called me less frequently during college. When she did call, it was usually brief. She was busy with classes, friends, activities. I understood. This was what I'd wanted for her, wasn't it? A full, rich life beyond the limitations of my own experience. But sometimes I'd lie awake at night, staring at the water stain on my ceiling, wondering if I was becoming invisible to the daughter I'd built my entire existence around. After graduation, Emily moved to Chicago's Gold Coast, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. She had a job at a marketing firm that paid well, she said, but somehow she always seemed to be struggling financially. The rent was too high. The student loans were crushing her. She needed professional clothes, a reliable car, money for networking events. I helped when I could. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Just until I get established, Mom. You know how expensive it is to start out in a career. I nodded and scraped together whatever she needed, even though my own expenses were rising. My blood pressure medication cost more each year. My arthritis made it harder to do physical work. I was aging, and my body was finally demanding payment for decades of pushing beyond its limits. The pattern continued for years. Emily would call when she needed money, disappear for weeks or months at a time, then resurface with another crisis. Each time she sounded genuinely distressed. Each time, I believed that helping her was temporary, that soon she'd be stable enough to stop needing my assistance. I celebrated her successes from a distance. Photos on social media of her at expensive restaurants, trendy bars, weekend trips with friends whose designer handbags cost more than my monthly income. She looked happy, successful, beautiful. Everything I'd dreamed she would become. But I noticed she never invited me to visit her apartment, never suggested we meet for dinner at one of those nice restaurants, never asked about my life, my health, my dreams for the future. "How are you doing, Mom?" became a perfunctory question she'd ask before launching into her latest problem. I'd give brief, cheerful answers because I didn't want to burden her with my own struggles. What could I say? That I was lonely? That my back hurt constantly? That I sometimes went days without talking to another human being? She was living the life I'd sacrificed everything to give her. Complaining about my own situation would have made all that sacrifice meaningless. The requests for money became more frequent, the amounts larger. $1,000 for car repairs, $1,500 for a security deposit when she moved to an even more expensive apartment, $2,000 to pay off credit card debt. Each time she promised it was temporary, a one-time emergency, the last time she'd ever have to ask. I started taking out small loans to help her. My credit wasn't great. Hard to build credit when you're living paycheck to paycheck. But I found lenders who would work with seniors on fixed incomes. The interest rates were high, but what choice did I have? This was my daughter, my only family, the person I'd devoted my life to raising. Last summer, she called crying about needing money for what she called a career development opportunity. Some kind of professional conference that cost $3,000 but would change everything for her career. I took out a loan at 22% interest to pay for it. I never heard what came of that opportunity. When I asked about it weeks later, she brushed off my question with a vague, "It was fine, Mom," and changed the subject. Now, staring at photos of her cocktail in Cancun, I realized I'd been nothing more than a bank account to her for years. An ATM with unconditional approval, no questions asked, no repayment expected. The woman sipping drinks by a resort pool wasn't the daughter I'd raised. She was a stranger who happened to share my DNA and my lifetime of sacrifice. Was I used? The question echoed in my mind like a prayer I was afraid to answer. Looking at my empty savings account, my stack of unpaid bills, my pantry full of generic brands and expired coupons, I finally had to face the truth I'd been avoiding for years. Yes, I had been used. Systematically, deliberately, completely used by the person I loved most in the world. The days following my discovery of Emily's Cancun photos blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and untouched meals. I found myself standing at my kitchen window for hours, watching the world continue its normal rhythm, while my own universe had cracked open like an egg dropped on concrete. Tuesday morning, I called her again. This time, she answered. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" Her voice was bright, cheerful, completely at odds with the crushing weight in my chest. I could hear laughter in the background, the sound of people having fun, living carefree lives funded by money meant for rent. "Emily, I saw your photos from Mexico. My voice came out smaller than I intended, like a child asking for permission to be hurt. There was a pause. Then, "Oh, those. Yeah, it was amazing. You would have loved it, Mom. The resort was incredible." She spoke as if this was normal, as if there was nothing strange about taking a luxury vacation with money she'd claimed to need for rent, as if my discovery was merely an opportunity to share vacation highlights. "But honey, you told me you needed that money for rent. You said you were going to be evicted." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted to something I'd never heard before. Not quite defensive, but dismissive, as if I was being unreasonable for asking questions. "Mom, I did need the money. But then Marcus, that's my boyfriend, he surprised me with this trip. It was already paid for, and I couldn't just not go. The landlord situation worked itself out. Marcus, the handsome man from the photos. I wondered how long she'd been seeing him. This man who could afford to surprise her with $1,000 vacations. I wondered why she'd never mentioned him before asking me to empty my savings account. How did the landlord situation work itself out? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Marcus helped me out. He covered the rent for a few months while I get back on my feet. He's really successful, Mom. He owns several businesses. The words hit me like physical blows. She had a boyfriend who could afford to pay her rent, buy her vacation trips, solve her financial problems with ease. Yet she'd chosen to take my money instead. Money that represented months of medication I'd go without, food I wouldn't buy, small comforts I'd never afford. "Emily, if Marcus could help you, why did you ask me for the money?" "Because I didn't want to rely on him too much, you know. We're still getting to know each other, and I don't want him to think I'm just with him for his money." But she was comfortable thinking that about me, comfortable taking money from her elderly mother who could barely afford her own medications, comfortable letting me sacrifice my grandmother's bracelet, comfortable allowing me to take out loans I'd struggle to repay. "So what happened to the $4,000 I sent you?" I used some of it to pay off other bills, credit card stuff, and I needed some new clothes for work, and my car needed repairs." Her voice trailed off, and I realized she was making it up as she went along. "Emily, I sold my grandmother's bracelet for that money, the one your great-grandmother gave me. It's been in our family for generations." Silence. Then, "Oh, I didn't know it was that important to you." Didn't know it was important. A family heirloom I'd treasured for 40 years, and she didn't know it was important. "I should probably go, Mom. Marcus is taking me to brunch at this amazing place, and I need to get ready." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone like it might eventually offer some explanation for what had just happened. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Emily's social media posts, scrolling back months, looking for clues about this life she'd been living while telling me she was struggling. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Photos from expensive restaurants, designer handbags, weekend trips to places I'd never been able to afford, concert tickets that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, spa days, shopping sprees, nights out at clubs where the drinks cost $20 each. And through it all, comments from Marcus, heart emojis, inside jokes, references to gifts he'd bought her. They'd been together for at least 6 months, based on when he first appeared in her photos. 6 months during which she'd called me crying about money 4 separate times. I found posts about treating herself to things she deserved, about living her best life, about not letting anyone dim her shine, posts about the importance of cutting negative people out of your life and surrounding yourself with people who support your dreams. Was I negative people? Was I someone who dimmed her shine? I kept scrolling, looking for any mention of me, any acknowledgement of the sacrifices that had made her lifestyle possible. There was nothing. In Emily's carefully curated online life, I simply didn't exist. 3 days later, my phone rang. Emily again. "Mom, I have the most amazing news. Marcus proposed. I was supposed to be happy. A mother is supposed to be overjoyed when her daughter finds love, gets engaged, starts planning a future. But all I could think about was the irony. My daughter was marrying a man who could give her everything she'd ever asked me for and more. That's wonderful, sweetheart. When did this happen? Last night. He took me to this incredible restaurant. It's the same place where celebrities eat when they're in Chicago. He had the ring hidden in the dessert, and there was a violinist playing our song. And everyone in the restaurant was watching. It was like a fairy tale, Mom. She described the ring. 3 carats, custom designed, worth more than I'd made in several years. She described the proposal, the celebration afterward, the champagne that cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month. We're thinking about a destination wedding, she continued, her voice bubbling with excitement. Maybe Italy or the French Riviera. Marcus says money is no object, that I deserve to have the wedding of my dreams. Money is no object. The phrase echoed in my head. Money had been an object for me every single day of my adult life. I'd counted every penny, sacrificed every comfort, worked until my body broke down, all to give Emily opportunities that Marcus could now provide with casual ease. Mom, are you there? Aren't you happy for me? Of course I'm happy for you, honey. When are you thinking of having the wedding? Probably next spring. We want to give ourselves time to plan everything perfectly. Oh, and Mom? I know this might be awkward, but Marcus thinks it might be better if we keep the wedding small. Just close family and friends, you know? His parents will be there, of course, and his business associates. But we want it to be intimate. Close family. I wondered where I fit in that category. I wondered if a mother who'd raised her daughter alone, who'd sacrificed everything for her education and opportunities, qualified as close family in Emily's new world. Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you happy. I'm so glad you understand, Mom. You've always been so supportive. That's what I'd been, wasn't it? I'd supported her dreams, her education, her lifestyle, her emergencies, her lies. I'd been endlessly, unconditionally supportive while she built a life that had no room for me in it. After she hung up, I sat in my empty apartment and tried to imagine what my life would look like now. Emily wouldn't need my money anymore. Marcus could provide everything she wanted and more. She probably wouldn't need my emotional support either. She'd have a husband, a new family, a social circle of wealthy friends. I'd spent 34 years building my entire identity around being Emily's mother. I'd given up dreams, relationships, opportunities, financial security, my health, my future, all for her. And now, she was moving on to a life where I was irrelevant. That's when the loneliness hit me like a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. I wasn't just losing my daughter. I was losing my purpose, my identity, my reason for existing. I looked around my sparse apartment, at the second-hand furniture and the empty walls, at the life I'd built around someone who was about to leave me behind completely. For the first time in my adult life, I had no idea who I was supposed to be. The tears came then, silent and endless. For all the years I'd spent being useful to someone who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. I cried for my grandmother's bracelet, for my empty savings account, for the medications I'd skipped to pay Emily's bills. But mostly, I cried for the woman I used to be before I disappeared into the role of Emily's mother, and for the woman I was supposed to become now that even that role had been taken away from me. In the darkness of my apartment, with only the sound of my neighbor's television through the thin walls, I finally understood the depth of my betrayal. I hadn't just been used for money. I'd been erased as a person, reduced to nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat. And the cruelest part was that I'd done it to myself, convinced that martyrdom was the same thing as love. A week passed before I found the courage to confront Emily directly. The words I'd rehearsed in my bathroom mirror felt like broken glass in my throat. But I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. When I finally called her, my voice was steadier than I expected. Emily, we need to talk about what happened with the money. Mom, I'm really busy right now. Marcus and I are looking at wedding venues and this can't wait. Something in my tone must have surprised her because she went quiet. You lied to me about needing rent money, then went to Cancun. I need to understand why. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally spoke, her voice had taken on that particular quality she'd perfected as a teenager. Equal parts defensive and dismissive. I didn't lie, Mom. I did need money. Just because I also went on a trip doesn't mean I was lying. Emily, You told me you were 3 months behind on rent. You said you'd be evicted if you didn't pay by Friday. Then you went to a luxury resort in Mexico. The rent situation got resolved. Marcus helped me out. Marcus. I repeated the name like it tasted bitter. This boyfriend you never mentioned before taking $4,000 from me. How long have you been seeing him? That's not really relevant. How long, Emily? Another pause. About 8 months. 8 months. During which she'd called me crying about money 4 separate times. During which I'd taken out loans, sold family heirlooms, skipped medications to help her with emergencies. So for 8 months, you've been dating someone wealthy enough to pay your rent and take you on expensive vacations, but you kept asking me for money instead. Mom, you're making this sound worse than it is. I didn't want to rely on Marcus too much. We were still getting to know each other. The audacity of it took my breath away. But you were comfortable relying on me? Your 68-year-old mother on a fixed income? That's different. You're my mom. That's what mothers do. What mothers do? My voice cracked. Emily, I sold my grandmother's bracelet for that money, the one that's been in our family for 3 generations. I took out a loan at 22% interest. I've been eating crackers and peanut butter for dinner because I can't afford groceries. I never asked you to do those things. I chose to help my daughter who was supposedly about to be homeless. The words came out louder than I intended, and I heard Mrs. Peterson's television volume go down through the thin walls. How was I supposed to know you were lying? I wasn't lying. I was just managing my finances the best way I knew how. Managing her finances. That's what she called taking money from her elderly mother while having a wealthy boyfriend handle her actual expenses. Emily, do you understand what you've done to me? I'm going to be paying back that loan for years. I can't afford my blood pressure medication this month because of the money I gave you. Mom, stop. You're being dramatic. If you couldn't afford it, you should have said no. Should have said no. In 34 years of being her mother, when had no ever been an option? When had Emily ever accepted no gracefully? When have I ever been allowed to say no to you? The question hung in the air between us. That's not fair. I never forced you to do anything. You always said I was your priority, that you'd do anything for me. Was that just talk? And there it was. The manipulation I'd been blind to for years. My love for her, my sacrifices, my promises to always be there, all twisted into weapons against me. My own words used to justify her betrayal. Of course I meant it. But Emily, love shouldn't be about taking advantage of someone. Taking advantage? Mom, you're my mother. Helping me isn't taking advantage. It's what families do. What about what you do for family? What have you ever done for me? The question seemed to genuinely puzzle her. She was quiet for a long moment, as if the concept of reciprocal support within families was foreign to her. I call you. I include you in my life. I tell you about what's happening with me. Include me in her life. She called when she needed money and disappeared for weeks at a time. She told me about her problems only when they required financial solutions. That was her definition of inclusion. Emily, when was the last time you asked how I was doing? Really asked, and listened to the answer. I ask how you are all the time. You ask, and I say fine, and you immediately start talking about yourself. When was the last time you visited me? When was the last time we had dinner together that wasn't about you needing something? Mom, I'm busy. I have a career, a relationship, a social life. I can't be calling you every day. I'm not asking for every day. I'm asking for anything. Any sign that you see me as a person, rather than just a resource. That's not fair. You're my mother. Of course I see you as a person. Do you? What's my favorite book? What am I afraid of? What do I do with my time when I'm not working or helping you? What makes me happy? Silence. Long, devastating silence. Mom, why are you asking me these things? Because I've spent 34 years knowing everything about you, and you know nothing about me. Because I've made your life my entire world, and I don't exist in yours except when you need money. You're being unfair. Just because I don't know your favorite book doesn't mean I don't care about you. Then tell me one thing about me that has nothing to do with being your mother. One interest, one fear, one dream I have for my own life. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Emily, are you there? I'm here. I don't understand why you're attacking me like this. I thought you were happy being my mom. I thought that was enough for you. Happy being her mom. As if I'd never been anything else. Never wanted anything else. Never dreamed of anything beyond serving her needs. It was enough when I thought you valued it. When I thought you appreciated what I was giving up for you. But Emily, you've been taking my money while having someone else who could help you. You've been lying to me for months. I haven't been lying. I've been trying to be independent, to not rely on Marcus too much. I thought you'd be proud of me for that. Proud of you for lying to me? For taking money from your elderly mother instead of asking your wealthy boyfriend for help? You're twisting everything I say. I came to you because I trust you. Because I knew you'd help me. Isn't that what you want? For me to trust you? The conversation was spinning away from me again. My legitimate hurt being reframed as unreasonable demands. Emily had perfected this dance over the years, turning every confrontation into evidence of my failures as a mother. I want honesty, Emily. I want to be treated with respect. I want to feel like I matter to you as a person, not just as someone who gives you money. You do matter to me. You're my mother. That's not an answer. That's just a biological fact. I don't know what you want me to say, Mom. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but I didn't do anything wrong. I needed help, and you helped me. That's what mothers and daughters do. Sorry if she hurt my feelings. Not sorry for lying. Not sorry for taking advantage of me. Not sorry for prioritizing a stranger's comfort over her mother's financial security. Sorry if I was too sensitive to handle her version of normal family dynamics. Emily, I need you to understand something. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep giving you money I don't have while you live a life I'll never be able to afford. So you're cutting me off? You're abandoning me because I'm finally happy? Abandoning her. Because setting boundaries was abandonment. Because refusing to be financially exploited was cruelty. I'm not abandoning you. I'm asking you to stop taking advantage of me. I can't believe you're saying this. After everything we've been through together, after how close we've always been. Close. We'd been close the way a parasite is close to its host. We haven't been close, Emily. I've been giving, and you've been taking. That's not closeness. That's exploitation. I'm hanging up now, Mom. When you're ready to stop attacking me and start acting like my mother again, you can call me back. The line went dead, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone like it might offer some explanation for what had just happened. For the first time in my adult life, I'd stood up to Emily. I'd asked for honesty, for respect, for basic human consideration, and she'd hung up on me. But instead of the crushing guilt I expected to feel, there was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. I'd finally said the words that had been choking me for years. I'd finally admitted that the relationship I'd built my entire life around was one-sided, exploitative, and unsustainable. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Not empty, but peaceful. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for Emily to call with another crisis, another need, another emergency that would require me to sacrifice something else I couldn't afford to lose. I was alone, but I was no longer being used. And somehow, that felt like progress. The morning after my confrontation with Emily, I woke up to something I hadn't experienced in years. Silence that wasn't filled with dread. For the first time in decades, I wasn't wondering when she'd call with another crisis, another need, another emergency that would require me to choose between her wants and my basic necessities. I made my coffee in the chipped World's Best Mom mug, but instead of the usual bitter taste of sacrifice, it just tasted like coffee. I sat at my small kitchen table, looking out at the convenience store parking lot where teenagers gathered before school, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd started a day without immediately worrying about Emily's problems. My phone sat silent on the counter. No demanding rings, no crisis text messages, no voicemails that would send my blood pressure soaring before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. The quiet felt strange, almost foreign, like wearing shoes that don't pinch after years of accepting pain as normal. I opened my laptop, an ancient thing Emily had convinced me to buy years ago, so we can stay in touch easier, though she'd rarely used it for that purpose. I pulled up my bank account and stared at the numbers that had defined my limitations for so long. The balance was pathetic, the monthly income fixed and insufficient, but for the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much I could spare for someone else's emergency. That's when I did something I'd never done before. I made a budget for just me, not me and Emily's crises. Not me and the possibility of her next emergency, just me. The numbers were stark. After rent, utilities, medication, and basic groceries, I had almost nothing left. But almost nothing was still something, and it was mine. Every penny belonged to me, could be spent on my needs, my tiny comforts, my own survival. I walked to the discount grocery store where I'd shopped for years, but instead of buying the cheapest of everything, I allowed myself small indulgences. Real butter instead of margarine, name-brand cereal, a small container of fresh strawberries that cost $3 and felt like luxury. At the checkout, I didn't calculate whether I could afford groceries and still have money left over for Emily's next call. I just bought food for myself, like a normal person living a normal life. The cashier, a young woman about Emily's age, smiled at me while ringing up my items. "These strawberries are so good," she said, scanning the container. "My grandma always said fresh fruit was worth the extra cost." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," I replied, surprised by how normal the conversation felt. When was the last time I'd talked to someone without the weight of Emily's problems pressing down on me? She always told me to take care of myself first. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. The words followed me home, echoing in my mind as I climbed the stairs to my apartment. I'd been pouring from an empty cup for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to have anything left for myself. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I ran a bath. Not a quick shower to save money on the hot water bill, but an actual bath with bubbles I'd bought at the dollar store. I lit a candle I'd been saving for a special occasion and realized that choosing myself was special enough. The warm water felt like forgiveness against my aching joints. My arthritis had gotten so much worse over the past few years, aggravated by stress and the physical demands of working multiple jobs to support Emily's lifestyle. But lying in that tub, surrounded by lavender-scented bubbles, I felt my muscles relax for the first time in months. I thought about the cashier's grandmother, about pouring from empty cups, about the years I'd spent giving away pieces of myself until I wasn't sure what was left. My phone rang while I was soaking. Emily's ringtone, a song she'd programmed in years ago that I'd never changed. My heart jumped with the old automatic response, the Pavlovian conditioning of decades spent dropping everything for her needs. But I didn't get out of the bath. I let it ring. The voicemail notification chimed, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. The choice to ignore it. The knowledge that Emily's problems were not automatically my emergencies. I stayed in the bath until the water began to cool, then wrapped myself in my softest towel and made tea in a mug that didn't remind me of obligations I couldn't fulfill. Only then did I listen to the voicemail. "Mom, it's me. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I think you're right. I haven't been appreciating everything you do for me. Marcus and I are having dinner with his parents tomorrow night, and I was wondering if you wanted to join us. I think it would be nice for you to meet them, and for them to meet the woman who raised me. Call me back." The message should have filled me with joy. Emily acknowledging my sacrifices, inviting me into her new life, wanting to show me off to her future in-laws. This was what I'd dreamed of for years. Recognition, inclusion, proof that my sacrifices had meant something. But as I listened to her voice, I heard something I'd missed before. The calculation. The way she phrased it as doing something for me rather than acknowledging what she'd done to me. The casual assumption that one dinner invitation would erase months of deception and financial exploitation. I didn't call her back that night. The next morning brought a text. "Mom, did you get my voicemail? The dinner is at 7 p.m. at the Four Seasons. I already made the reservation, so let me know if you can make it." The Four Seasons. A restaurant where the average entree cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. I imagined sitting at a table with Emily, Marcus, and his wealthy parents, trying to make conversation while wearing my best dress. A 5-year-old outfit from a department store clearance rack. I imagined Marcus's parents asking what I did for work, where I lived, making polite conversation while silently calculating my net worth and wondering what their son's future wife had in common with someone like me. I imagined Emily presenting me like a trophy. This is my mother, who worked 3 jobs to put me through Northwestern, turning my sacrifices into a story that made her look good rather than acknowledging the ongoing cost of those sacrifices. I texted back, "I can't make it tonight. Thank you for the invitation." Her response came immediately. "Why not? This is important, Mom. I really want you there. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to the 4 seasons. You look fine in whatever you wear. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that." Easy advice from someone who'd never walked into a room knowing she was the poorest person there, wearing clothes that marked her as different, as less than, as someone who didn't belong. "Emily, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not comfortable with expensive restaurants. It's not about the money, Mom. It's about meeting Marcus's family. Not about the money. Everything was about money when you didn't have any. The clothes you wore, the confidence you projected, the way you fit into spaces designed for people with resources you'd never possess. Maybe we could have coffee instead, somewhere more casual. Mom, this is a special dinner. Marcus's parents are flying in from New York just for this. I can't just change the plans." Of course she couldn't. The plans were made around her needs, her comfort, her relationship. My discomfort was just an inconvenience to be managed or dismissed. "Then I hope you have a wonderful time. Give my regards to Marcus's parents." My phone rang within seconds. "Mom, what's wrong with you? This is my engagement dinner and you're refusing to come?" "I didn't know it was your engagement dinner. You said it was just dinner with his parents." "Well, it's both. Marcus wants to officially ask for their blessing, and I wanted you there to be part of it. Part of it. But on her terms, in her space, wearing my inadequacy like a costume for her performance of having overcome humble beginnings. Emily, I can't afford to eat at the 4 Seasons. A single appetizer there costs more than I spend on food in a day. I'll pay for your meal. Problem solved." She would pay for my meal with money that might have come from me, might have been another emergency loan I'd provided without knowing its real purpose. The irony was suffocating. "It's not just about the meal. I don't belong in that world." "What world?" "It's just dinner, Mom. You're making this too complicated. Just dinner." Just like the Cancun trip had been just a vacation, and the lies about rent had been just managing her finances. "I'm not making it complicated. I'm being honest about my limitations. Your limitations are in your head. You're choosing to feel uncomfortable. Choosing to feel uncomfortable. Like poverty was a mindset rather than a mathematical reality. Like the gap between my circumstances and Marcus's family's circumstances was something I could bridge with positive thinking. That's when something inside me shifted completely. Not broke. Broke implied something violent and sudden. This was more like settling. Like a foundation finding its natural level after years of artificial propping. "Emily, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "Mom?" Without interrupting. My voice carried an authority I didn't know I possessed. "I've spent 34 years making your life my priority. I've given you everything I had, borrowed money I couldn't afford to repay, sacrificed my health and my future so you could have opportunities I never had. And you've lied to me, taken advantage of me, and treated me like an ATM with unconditional approval. I'm not finished. Yesterday you invited me to dinner with your future in-laws at a restaurant I can't afford, wearing clothes I don't own, to celebrate an engagement paid for by a man who could have solved all your financial problems, but who you chose not to ask for help because you didn't want him to think you were using him for money. Do you understand the irony of that, Emily? You protected him from being used while using me." Silence. "I'm done. Not with being your mother. I'll always be your mother. But I'm done being your personal bank. I'm done sacrificing my well-being for your convenience. I'm done pretending that your success justifies my suffering." "Mom, you're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time in your adult life. I love you, Emily, but I won't be used by you anymore. If you want me in your life, it has to be as a person you respect, not as a resource you exploit." I hung up before she could respond, before she could twist my words into evidence of my failure as a mother, before she could make me doubt my right to basic human dignity. For the first time in decades, I'd chosen myself, and instead of the guilt I expected, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: peace. 3 months passed without a word from Emily. 3 months of silence that I initially feared would crush me, but instead felt like breathing freely for the first time in decades. Each morning, I woke up without the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach, without wondering what crisis awaited me. What financial emergency would drain what little I had left? The first thing I noticed was how different my apartment felt when it wasn't a staging area for someone else's drama. The morning light through my kitchen window seemed brighter. The silence felt peaceful, rather than lonely. Even my chipped "World's Best Mom" mug looked different. Not like a monument to sacrifice, but simply like a cup that held my coffee. I started small. On a Tuesday morning, instead of checking my phone for messages that might never come, I walked to the community center 6 blocks from my apartment. A handwritten sign in the window advertised senior services in cheerful blue letters, and something about its simplicity appealed to me. Inside, the walls were covered with bulletin boards full of activities I'd never considered. Art classes, walking groups, volunteer opportunities, educational workshops. A woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail approached me. "I'm Helen," she said, extending her hand. "Are you looking for something specific, or would you like me to show you around?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." "Like what? Community programs?" "Like anything for myself." Helen's expression softened with understanding. "Well, then we have a lot of options to explore. What interests you? What did you used to enjoy before whatever kept you away from doing things for yourself?" Before Emily consumed my entire existence. Before I forgot I was a person separate from my role as someone's mother, someone's emergency fund, someone's solution to problems they could have solved other ways. "I used to read," I said hesitantly. "And I used to cook. Real cooking, not just opening cans and heating things up." "Perfect. We have a book club that meets every Friday afternoon, and there's a cooking class on Wednesdays where everyone brings ingredients and we make meals together. Both groups are very welcoming to newcomers." That Friday, I found myself sitting in a circle with 12 other women, discussing a novel I'd actually finished, something I hadn't done in years. The book was about a woman who'd lost her identity in service to others and had to rebuild herself from scratch. The parallels weren't lost on me. "What did you think of Margaret's decision to leave everything behind?" asked Carol, a retired teacher with silver hair and intelligent eyes. "I thought it was brave," I said, surprising myself by speaking up. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are." "That's beautifully put," said another woman, Ruth. "Have you ever had to start over?" "I'm starting over now," I said, and realized it was true. The cooking class became my favorite part of the week. There's something magical about preparing food with others, sharing ingredients and techniques, creating meals that everyone enjoys together. I rediscovered my love for cooking. Not the desperate, budget-conscious meal planning I'd done for years, but the joy of creating something nourishing and beautiful. "You have wonderful instincts," said Margaret, the instructor, watching me prepare a simple pasta dish with fresh herbs from the community garden plot I'd started renting. "Have you considered taking more advanced classes?" "I can't afford advanced classes," I said automatically, then stopped. For the first time in years, "I can't afford it" wasn't because I'd given my money to someone else. It was just reality, and reality could be worked with. "The community college offers a continuing education program for seniors," Margaret said. "Very affordable, and they have culinary classes that might interest you." A week later, I found myself enrolled in Cooking on a Budget, Nutritious Meals for One, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. The classroom was full of people like me, older adults learning new skills, rediscovering old passions, refusing to accept that their best years were behind them. "I'm Susan," I told my cooking partner, a woman named Grace who'd recently been widowed after 43 years of marriage. "I'm learning to cook for myself," Grace said with a sad smile. "I spent decades cooking for my husband and children, and now I have to remember how to take care of just me." "I'm learning the same thing," I said, "taking care of just me." As the weeks passed, I began to recognize the woman I'd been before I disappeared into the role of Emily's mother. I remembered that I enjoyed wordplay and had opinions about books. I remembered that I had a talent for making simple ingredients taste extraordinary. I remembered that I could make people laugh with dry observations about the absurdities of daily life. Most surprisingly, I remembered that I was enough. Just Susan, without anyone depending on me, without anyone's crisis defining my days, without anyone's needs dictating my choices. The community center started feeling like home in a way my apartment never had. These people knew me as Susan, the book club member, who always had thoughtful insights. Susan, the cooking class participant who could transform basic ingredients into something special. Susan, the volunteer who helped organize the monthly potluck dinners. They didn't know me as Emily's mother, Emily's bank account, Emily's emotional dumping ground. They knew me as myself. One evening, while helping clean up after a particularly successful potluck, Helen approached me with a proposal. Susan, we're looking for someone to coordinate our new program for women in transition. Women who've lost spouses, adult children who've moved away, anyone who's dealing with major life changes. It would involve some administrative work, some event planning, and a lot of one-on-one support for women who are figuring out who they are outside their traditional roles. You want me to help other people? I asked, surprised. I want you to share what you've learned. You've been through a major transition yourself. Anyone can see how you've grown and changed over these past months. You understand what it's like to rebuild your identity, to learn to value yourself as an individual rather than just in relation to others. The idea of helping other women find themselves felt both terrifying and perfect. After years of being drained by someone who took everything I offered, the thought of working with people who might actually benefit from my experience felt like a gift. Would you be interested? Helen asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. Yes, I would. That night, lying in my small bed in my tiny apartment, I realized something remarkable had happened. For the first time in decades, I was excited about my future. Not because of what I could give someone else, not because of how I could solve someone else's problems, but because of what I could do with my own life. I had rediscovered Susan Williams, not Emily's mother, not anyone's emergency contact, not a resource to be exploited, just Susan, a woman with her own interests, her own talents, her own value. The woman who'd spent 34 years pouring from an empty cup had finally learned to fill it first. And amazingly, there was still plenty left to share with people who deserved it. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself, and it felt like coming home. 8 months after I'd asked Emily to leave my apartment, she called. I was in my community garden plot, harvesting tomatoes that had grown fat and red under my careful attention, when I heard my phone ring from inside my gardening basket. The August sun was warm on my shoulders, and my hands were stained with earth, and the honest satisfaction of nurturing something that had grown beautifully because I'd tended it without expecting anything in return. For a moment, I considered not answering. The old Susan would have dropped everything, dirt-covered hands and all, to take Emily's call. But the woman I'd become, the Susan who'd learned to value her own peace, her own time, her own needs, finished filling her basket with tomatoes before wiping her hands on her gardening apron and checking the caller ID. Emily. I let it ring twice more before answering, not out of spite, but because I could. Because her emergencies were no longer automatically my emergencies. Because I'd learned the revolutionary concept that other people's crises didn't require my immediate response. Hello, Emily. Mom. Her voice was different, quieter, less certain than the demanding tone I'd grown accustomed to over the years. How are you? How was I? When was the last time she'd asked that question and waited for a real answer? I'm well, I said, looking around my garden plot where tomatoes and basil grew in companionable harmony, where every plant I'd nurtured was thriving under consistent, patient care. I'm very well, actually. Good. That's good. A pause. Mom, I was wondering if we could talk. In person. There are some things I need to say to you. The old Susan would have said yes immediately, would have dropped everything to accommodate Emily's timeline, her needs, her convenience. The new Susan considered her own schedule, her own emotional capacity, her own desire to maintain the peace she'd worked so hard to build. What about? I asked. About everything. About what I did to you. about what I need to do to earn the right to be your daughter again. Earn the right. Not demand it, not manipulate for it, not assume it was automatically hers regardless of how she'd treated me. Earn it. Emily, I'm coordinating a program at the community center tomorrow evening. I could meet you for coffee Sunday afternoon. Coordinating a program? There was genuine surprise in her voice, as if the idea of me having activities, responsibilities, a life independent of her needs had never occurred to her. I work with women who are rebuilding their identities after major life changes. Women who've lost themselves in service to others and are learning to value themselves as individuals. Silence on the other end. Then, that sounds amazing, Mom. I'd love to hear about it. Sunday afternoon works perfectly. We met at a small cafe near the community center, a place I'd discovered during my months of learning to be alone without being lonely. Emily was already seated when I arrived, and I was struck by how different she looked. Not just thinner, though she was that, but less polished somehow. Her clothes were nice, but not designer. Her hair was simply styled rather than professionally blown out. She looked real in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. You look wonderful, Mom, she said as I sat down. Different. Happier. I am happier, I said simply. I ended things with Marcus. The statement hung between us. I waited for her to continue, no longer feeling the need to fill every silence with reassurance or questions. He wanted me to sign a prenup that would have left me with nothing if the marriage failed. And when I really looked at our relationship, I realized that's exactly what I deserved. I was with him for his money, and he knew it. We were both using each other, but at least he was honest about it. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, hands that had once displayed Marcus's expensive engagement ring now bare, except for a simple silver band I didn't recognize. I got a job, she continued. A real job, with a salary I can actually live on. I moved to a smaller apartment, one I can afford without help. I've been paying off my debts, including the loans I took out last year. That's good, I said, and meant it. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. I nodded. I've been going to therapy. Real therapy, not just complaining to friends who tell me what I want to hear. And my therapist helped me understand something that I should have realized years ago. Her voice cracked slightly. I financially abused you. For years. I took advantage of your love, your generosity, your inability to say no to me. I treated you like an ATM and told myself it was normal because you're my mother. The words I'd waited years to hear. But sitting across from her now, I realized they mattered less than I'd thought they would. Her acknowledgement didn't undo the years of exploitation, didn't restore my savings account, didn't give me back the opportunities I'd sacrificed for her convenience. But it was something. It was the beginning of honesty. I calculated how much money I took from you over the past 5 years, she continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from her purse, including the gifts, the emergency loans, the rent money, everything. It's $37,000. $37,000. More than I'd made in some years. More than I'd ever had in savings at one time. A number that represented vacations I'd never taken, medical care I'd postponed, small comforts I'd foregone so she could live beyond her means. I can't pay it all back at once, she said quickly, but I've set up a payment plan. $200 a month until it's paid off. It'll take about 15 years, but I want to make this right. Emily, please, let me finish. The money is just the beginning. I know I hurt you in ways that go beyond financial abuse. I know I treated you like you existed only to serve my needs. I know I never asked about your life, your dreams, your feelings. I know I turned you into a lie I told myself about what family means. She was crying now, but quietly, without the dramatic sobbing that had once been her way of redirecting conversations away from her accountability. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want to try to be the daughter you should have had, not the one who takes from you, but one who gives back, one who sees you as a person, not just as mom. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Not just remorse, which she'd performed many times over the years, but genuine recognition of harm done, understanding that her actions had consequences for someone other than herself. Emily, what's my favorite book? The question surprised her, just as it had 8 months ago. But this time, instead of blank confusion, I saw something else in her eyes. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But I'd like to learn. I'd like to know everything about you that I should have known all along. What am I afraid of? I don't know that either. But I want to. What makes me happy that has nothing to do with being your mother? I know you garden now, and you work with women at the community center, and you've joined a book club." She managed a small smile. "I drove by your garden plot before coming here. The tomatoes are beautiful." She'd taken the time to find my garden, to see the life I'd built without her, not to insert herself into it, but simply to witness it, to acknowledge that I existed as a person separate from my role in her life. "The money isn't the most important thing," I said finally, "though I appreciate your willingness to pay it back. What is the most important thing? That you see me, really see me, as someone whose life has value beyond what I can give you, as someone whose needs and feelings matter. I do see you, Mom. Maybe for the first time in my adult life, I really see you." We sat in silence for a moment, and it felt different from the charged silences of our previous conversations. Not comfortable exactly, but honest. Real. "I'd like to try," Emily said finally, "to build a relationship with you that isn't based on what I can get from you. I don't know how to do that. I've never had a relationship like that with anyone, but I want to learn. It would have to be different," I said. "I can't go back to being your emergency fund, your solution to problems you can solve yourself, your emotional support system when you won't do the work to support others in return. I understand. I don't want that either. I want to be your daughter, not your debt." The phrase struck me as profound in its simplicity. My daughter, not my debt. "We can try," I said. "But Emily, I've built a life for myself now. A life that doesn't revolve around your needs. I won't give that up to go back to being just your mother. I wouldn't want you to. The woman I've gotten to know over the past hour. The one with the garden and the job helping other women and the book club. She's someone I'd like to know better. Not because she's my mother, but because she seems like someone worth knowing." 3 months later, Emily and I have coffee every other Sunday. She tells me about her job, her therapy, her efforts to build healthy relationships with friends and colleagues. I tell her about my work at the community center, my garden, the books I'm reading, the women I'm helping find themselves after years of being lost in service to others. She asks about my life and listens to the answers. She remembers details from previous conversations. She's learning who I am as a person, and I'm learning who she might become when she's not performing the role of someone who takes what she wants and calls it love. The first payment of $200 arrived exactly when she promised it would. So did the second and the third. Not just the money, but the acknowledgement that what she took from me had value, had cost me something that mattered. More importantly, she's kept her word about seeing me as a person. When I had a minor surgery last month, she offered to help with practical things, grocery shopping, driving me to appointments, without making it about her inconvenience or sacrifice. When I mentioned being nervous about speaking at a conference for women in transition, she listened and offered encouragement without trying to fix my feelings or make the conversation about her own experiences. I'm learning to trust her again, slowly and carefully, the way you learn to trust a plant that's been transplanted, hoping it will take root in its new environment, but prepared for the possibility that it might not survive the change. But whether our relationship survives or not, I know something I didn't know a year ago. I'm enough. Susan Williams, standing alone, is enough. I have value that exists independent of what I can give others. I have worth that doesn't depend on being needed, being useful, being willing to sacrifice myself for people who don't appreciate the cost. I spent 34 years believing that love meant giving everything away, that being a good mother meant having nothing left for myself. I learned, almost too late, that real love requires boundaries, that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. The women I work with at the community center are learning the same lesson. We sit in circles, sharing stories of how we lost ourselves in service to others, how we confused martyrdom with love, how we're learning to rebuild our identities around our own worth rather than our usefulness to people who took us for granted. You can't pour from an empty cup, I tell them, remembering the young cashier who first shared that wisdom with me. But more importantly, You shouldn't have to empty your cup to prove your love is real. The most revolutionary thing I've learned is this: choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You cannot truly love others from a place of emptiness, resentment, and self-sacrifice. You can only love them fully when you've learned to love yourself enough to maintain boundaries, to protect your own well-being, to insist on relationships built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. If you're listening to this story and recognizing pieces of your own life, if you've been the person who gives everything away, who sacrifices their own needs for people who don't appreciate the cost, who's lost themselves in service to others who see you only as a resource to be used, I want you to know something. You are enough, just as you are, without giving anything away, without solving anyone else's problems, without sacrificing your own well-being for people who don't consider the impact on you. You have value that exists independent of what you can do for others. And it's never too late to choose yourself. Have you ever found yourself giving everything to people who never seem to appreciate the sacrifice? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel, because sometimes the message we most need to hear is that we matter too.